I'm Dane, and this is Dane Explains. Have you ever heard the game, The 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon? It posits the idea that if you draw a line from yourself to someone you've met, to someone they've met, and so on, all the way to a person most distant from you, that there would be at most 6 people between you and that person. Each person between you and them is called a degree of separation. Well, what if we did this in time? How many degrees of separation are we separated from Lincoln, King Henry VIII, or Jesus? Let me explain. The conjecture of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon is actually not quite accurate. There are uncontacted tribes out there that we can assume haven't had any contact with anyone else for a long time. So the number of degrees between you and one of those tribesmen would be larger, because you'd have to go back in time until you reach a point where that tribe wasn't isolated, and then work your way forward. Some of those tribes in South America decided to start sharing contact to escape the Spanish shortly after they arrived in the New World over 500 years ago. So, that's a long time. But how many degrees are actually separated from you and them? 500 years sounds like a lot, but how long ago was it in the terms of degrees of separation? Everyone's probably familiar with the idea of a generation, which is usually a time period of about 20 years. This is enough time for someone who was born to grow up and start having kids of their own, hence spawning a new generation. I'm showing my age a bit here, but I was born right at the beginning of the millennial generation, which corresponds to the early 80s. Each century is about 5 generations. But we are limited to only meeting and knowing people in our own generation. By the time we're 10 years old, most of us have met somebody who is a centenarian, or at least nearly so, usually in the form of a grandparent, great-grandparent, or great-aunt or uncle. When I was young, I knew my great-grandmother, who was my father's mother's mother. She was nearly a century older than me, being born in the mid to late 1880s. I think for most people today, the 1800s seems like a faraway time, especially since, at this point, anyone younger than 25 hasn't even seen the 1900s. So they may be a bit surprised to learn that most millennials have probably met someone at some point who was born in the 1800s. My father, who was born in the 1940s, when he was around 10 in the 1950s, met a man who was about 100 years old. A man who was a young boy during the Civil War. So the period of the Civil War was only separated from many people alive today by 1 degree. What's even more mind-blowing is these photos. They are some very early photos taken during the Civil War of veterans of the American Revolutionary War who were alive during the Civil War. Now, without poring over dusty old papers in a library, we can only guess as to who met who. But we can assume that some people who were still alive in the 1950s, who were in their 90s or nearly 100, had met people who were alive during the Revolutionary War in the 1770s. So it seems each degree of separation between us and the past is maybe about a century. So for me, the degrees of separation between me and the Revolutionary War is at most 3, maybe even just 2, because if my great-grandmother had met anyone who was a centenarian when she was very young in the 1880s, that person could have been born before the end of the Revolutionary War in the 1780s. Now, average lifespans do get shorter the further back you go, but there's always been at least a few people who have led pretty much completely healthy lives until they reach 100 or more, no matter how far back you go. So there are at most 1 degree of separation from us and Abraham Lincoln, 4 between us and King Henry VIII, and 19 between us and Jesus. That's pretty mind-blowing that there are probably fewer degrees of separation between you and someone who lived 500 years ago than between you and many people who are living on Earth today. Returning to the question of those uncontacted tribes, if they've been out of touch since the 1500s, that would mean there would probably only be 8 to 10 degrees of separation between them and us, going probably 4 degrees back and then another 4 to 6 forward, assuming they don't often have anyone who makes it too far past 90, since they're just small tribes consisting of a few dozen people at most without modern medicine. So it only adds a few more degrees of separation, even for people who have been uncontacted for 500 years. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, and other topics ranging from theology to science, please press the like button. Subscribe to my channel and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Also, please support me on Patreon to get extra content and special perks. Link in the description. The more people who support me, the more time I can dedicate to making videos like this one. So, until next time, have a great week.